So this happened about 3 months back. It stuck with me and I just want to get the whole story off my chest, to be honest. I live in a rural area in the northwest coast of Scotland. The scenery is beautiful with lochs and bens, lakes and hills for the non-Scots right outside my door. The nearest village is about a 15-minute drive away and only has a few hundred people itself. Other than that, there are a few other houses sparsely dotted about, but the closest neighbor is still a mile or two away from me. My house is next to the loch, which I'll fish in from time to time, and a large field which acts as my backyard. The field is then abruptly met with a tree line, which is the entrance to one of the largest wooded areas in Scotland. That's more or less the layout of the gaff. Other than that, it's just me living there. My other half passed away a few years ago, and since I fell into a bit of a depression, it was a tough time in my life, but I got through it. Especially after I adopted the wee man, Alfie. Alfie's a border terrier and acts as my best pal. He goes everywhere with me and has really been the difference between life and death at times. Because we're so isolated up here, the usual routine is just before bed, about 9 or 10 p.m. I'll open the back door for Alfie to run round the field for a bit, get out any last minute shites or pisses. It's Scotland, so naturally 360 days of the year are freezing. Because of this, I'll shut the door behind him and wait for him to come and scratch the door after to let him in. So this one night, the 25th of April this year, things were as normal. I was sat watching some rubbish on Netflix, Alfie next to me. The wee man got up and started stretching, so I made a mental note to go and let him out. I finished watching whatever I was watching and went and opened the back door. The night was of course pitch black and I could just see the outline of the trees in the tree line. I lit up a quick cigarette. Bad habit, I know, and smoked it quickly before closing the door. I went and did some bits and bobs, closing curtains and doing some dishes, when I heard Alfie scratching away at the door. It had been about 5 or 10 minutes, so I went to go and let him in again. I put the plate I was cleaning down and began walking down the corridor to the back door. I yawned on the way and gave Alfie a rub on the head as I walked past. I thought about having another cigarette, but I gave Alfie a rub on the head. The thought stopped me dead in my tracks. I turned back, and sure enough, Alfie was lying snoozing in the corridor. Weird. I could have sworn I heard him scratching on the door. He must not have gone out when I opened the door, and then I imagined the scratching. I turned around again to head back the way I came, and chills ran down my spine. I heard the scratching again. Now I knew for a fact it wasn't Alfie, he was lying right next to me. I also knew for a fact I hadn't imagined it. I waited a few more seconds and the scratching persisted. I instantly felt my heart drop to my stomach. I felt queasy. What the fuck was scratching at my door? I decided to go upstairs to my bedroom because I knew I could get a view of the back door and what was at it from that window. I cautiously crept up the stairs and then slowly pulled the curtains back just enough to peek through. I promise on my late Eileen's grave, this next bit is completely true. I watched in horror as a fully grown man who was perched on all fours began to scratch at my back door again. This sight nearly made me faint. I'm not a small man and I chop and deliver firewood for a living, so I'm pretty strong, but just pure creepiness of seeing this shook me to my core. I couldn't see his face that well, but I could make out he was maybe 30, 40 years old and was maybe of Western Asian descent, with brown skin and a scraggly black beard. A point that may be relevant is that my particular area of Scotland is very white. About 99% I think, and everyone knows each other anyway. No one even knows someone of that description in any of the local villages within 40 or 50 miles. I also could make out a grin on the man's face. It looked like he was trying to stifle it, however, like he was excited but was trying to keep himself composed. The scratch noises were indistinguishable from Alfie's, so I immediately knew he must have had long fingernails. He scratched the door a couple more times over the next minute or so. After this, he crawled down the 3 or 4 stairs back to the back garden and began crawling in circles. This image was even more sickening than the last. A grown man crawling on the floor like a dog. What the actual fuck? That was, until he burst out into a sprint. He had quickly risen from his crawl and taken the 10 to 15 meters he was away as a run up the charge straight into the back door. I fitted those doors myself, so I trusted the hinges they were built on, and rightly so. The man bounced right off the door, but the sound immediately alerted Alfie. Alfie started barking uncontrollably, and I took this as a chance to say something too. "Get the fuck out of here, mate. I can fucking see ya," I shouted down. The man didn't even flinch. He just stood up from the floor and brushed himself off. He didn't even look up at me. He then just turned around and walked calmly further into the backyard, further and further until he hit the tree line, and still kept walking. The guy had only been wearing a hoodie and dark gray tracksuit bottoms, so he must have been freezing, to then venture off into the dark woods alone, so carelessly. The whole situation had me equally as confused as it did terrified. I called the local village's police station. They said they'd sent someone out to talk to me. When the officer got here, I told him the story and recounted the man to the best of my abilities, but after I finished recounting the tale, all I got was a, "Are you drinking again, Derek?" I couldn't believe it. I had had a wee bit of an issue a few years back after Eileen, but put the booze down and been sober for the last 12 months. He clearly just didn't believe me. Fuck. Didn't know if I'd believe me either, to be honest. He left and it was just me and Alfie again. Neither of us slept a wink the rest of the night. I also broke my sobriety for the first time that night, which is not something I'm proud of. And that was that. Didn't hear anything about a body in the woods. Didn't hear anything about a man of that description. Didn't hear anything about the same thing happening to the neighbors. I couldn't believe it. The more I went over it in my head, the more it began to terrify me. That man must have been watching me and noticed my habit of letting Alfie in when he scratched the door for however many nights before he tried it himself. Was just lucky Alf decided not to go out that night. The part that really terrifies me is that he never knew I was watching him. So when he crawled down and kept his acting like a dog act facade going, that was just for him. He was acting like that thinking no one was watching. I've spent the past months combing over all the pictures of any escaped mental patients or convicts over the last 20 years, but nothing. It's almost as if the guy, fuck. I hear the fucking scratching again. I hear the fucking scratching at my door again, and Alfie is at my feet. It sounds slower this time, and deeper into the wood of the door. I am gonna go and confront this bastard. Fuck it. Wish me luck. I'll update when it's over. Hiya everyone, got a wee update for you all from my last post. Thanks for all the lovely comments worrying about mine and Alf's safety. We're okay for now. Regarding guns, we live in Scotland, so nae guns here unfortunately. So last night was pretty wild. Heard the scratching as I was writing, posted it quickly without thinking, and immediately started panicking. Alfie could sense something was up too. Poor wee guy was stood behind me whining but still giving out defensive barks towards the back door. I questioned what to do for a solid minute or so. Should I really confront him? Fuck it. Live by the sword, die by the sword. Get the fuck out of here, you fucking bastard, I shouted through the door to him. I heard nothing but silence. Through the pane glass window of the door though, I could see his figure rise up slowly. I'm guessing he had been on his all fours again, but now standing on just 2 legs. I could see the true size of this man. He was probably about the same height as the door, maybe 6'6", and his wide frame was noticeable even through the silhouette. Fuck. All that fucking bravado out the window now. He lifted his arm back, and I thought he was about to try and smash through the door with punches, but he tapped so gently on the glass pane it was barely audible. Other than that it was silent. The slight buzz of the telly and the living room clock ticking were the only sounds present. Until he broke that silence. "Ah, but mister, please let me in," he said in a voice imitating a little girl. It was clearly a grown man's voice, but he had raised his pitch and even put on this slight childish lisp to give the impression he was a child, which he clearly wasn't. "I wanna go and swim, mister." "Get the fuck away, mate. You're nae fucking right in the head. Gonna give you to 5, and if you're not gone, there's gonna be fucking trouble, understand?" Silence once again. 1, 2, 3. I heard footsteps walking away down the back steps again. Thank fuck, he's going. That relief was short-lived. That hole in my stomach opened again when I heard him going around the side of the house. And this time, he was running. I instantly panicked. Shit, had I locked the fucking front door? I sprinted down the corridor to the front door, Alfie at my heels, and turned the key as soon as I got to the front door. Not even a second after the door bolted locked, the handle started jittering. He was trying to open it. He tried 5 or 6 times, and when he realized it was locked, I heard this tiny giggling, as if he was just doing it to himself. This game was genuinely funny to him. I waited a few minutes before going to the window by front door. It was, of course, the same man. He was just stood there, staring at the door, trying to will it open with his eyes or something. That was when he turned, eerily slowly, and looked straight at me through the window. Even thought it was dark, I could still make out the crazed look in his eyes. I could see a lot of people theorizing kelpies or some other Celtic myth creatures, but nay chance, this was the crazed look of a man who had lost touch with everything, lost touch with any shred of sanity he had. He then spoke one last line in his childish imitation voice, one last line that stayed with me. "I'm going to go and swim with Eileen now." What the fuck? How did this fucker know Eileen? How did he know her name? How did he know? What happened? I was frozen in fear, in anger, in shock. By the time I looked back at the front door, he'd gone. He was calmly walking away, the same way he'd done into the forest that night a few months back. He was walking away, this time to the loch. He walked and walked and walked before walking straight into the dark water. I know it's summer, but it's Scotland. That water is still freezing, especially at 3 in the morning. He swam around the corner, a sort of breaststroke, and I didn't see him again. I sat there, me and Alf, shaken to my core once again. What the actual fuck? That last comment. Who is this fucking man? I took myself off to bed in a zombie-like state and woke up this morning in a daze, surprised I even got some sleep last night. Who was this man? Why had he been trying to get into my house? What did he want? How the fuck did he know my poor, late Eileen? So many questions. So there I was this morning lying in bed with Alf, reading through Reddit, about to start this update actually, when I fancied some coffee to start the day. I went downstairs to the kitchen, and you can imagine my horror when the kitchen floor was covered in water. Water that was clearly from the loch outside. Hiya guys, another update for all of yous. Been a busy couple of days, and a few things have happened since the update on Friday, but I told myself I'd keep you all posted, so I'm gonna try my best to. Naturally, on Friday morning when I woke up to the loch's water all over my kitchen floor, I freaked out. I could tell it was the loch from the darker color as well as the bits of dirt and grass in the water. My first reaction was, fuck, this freak is gonna be somewhere in my gaff. So I immediately went on a hunt. I grabbed one of the axes I use for work, took the wee man, and searched every room in the house. No one there, nothing stolen, absolutely fuck all. That was until I got to my bedroom, the bedroom I had been sleeping in all night. I looked at the wardrobe, closet for my American pals, in the corner and feared the worst instantly. I had a gut feeling something was amiss. I raised the axe up as I walked over. I couldn't breathe, I was that nervous. I took one last moment before I swung open the door. Nothing. No one in there. Fucking relief. But I did notice one thing missing. Eileen's dress from when we got married. It's usually hung up on the far right side of the wardrobe. Out of sight, out of mind. But it was gone. Was a beautiful dress, mind, and she looked stunning in it. Our wedding down by Loch Lomond, in the middle of Scotland, when she came walking down the aisle. Sorry I'm rambling. I couldn't believe this bastard had taken it. Why her wedding dress? And how did he know her fucking name the night before? And how did he know about? Ignore that. Can't be arsed retyping it now. All he left was his dirty clothes in its place, unbranded, and no name tags. Fuck. I hope that doesn't mean he's wearing the dress now, does it? I called the local police again and explained the situation. PC Harley answered the phone and barely gave me time of day. Cheeky bastard, same as I'd got from the other officer the other night. Have you been drinking again, Derek? Are you sure you didn't imagine it, Derek? Are you sure you want to push your luck again after last year, Derek? Bastards. Holding my history against me. I was innocent anyway. Sorry for all these rambles by the way. I'm having a wee drink of whiskey while I write this. Makes me chatty. Anyway, it got to last night, Saturday night. Things took a really grave turn. I was sat with Alfie. The night had started closing in. I could hear the crickets outside. The fireflies were in the air, and the air was that nighttime crisp. I fancied a cigarette, so decided to walk down to the lock's edge to have one this time. It's just so quiet, and looking out on the lock whilst having a smoke on your own, it's beautiful. I offered for the wee man to come, but he sort of just whined and didn't want to leave the gaff. Suit yourself, I thought. I left the door just open in case he changed his mind, and headed towards the lock. I just sparked my smoke and was looking over the water when you wouldn't believe what I saw. Eileen's dress floating in the water. That fucking bastard. Taking my dead wife's wedding dress and chucking it in the lock. When I get my fucking hands on him, I knew what I had to do. Against all my instincts, I stripped down my underwear and dove in. I know what you're thinking. This guy's a fucking idiot. I am, but it has sentimental value, alright. I swam and swam further into the darkness until I found myself in the middle of the lock. These locks go up to 1,000 feet deep, hence why treading water in the middle of one in the dead of night, I began to have a sickening feeling. I clutched onto Eileen's dress and looked around at the empty water around me. I didn't realize how cold it was until now. I began to panic and shiver, thinking about what was below me, what could grab me from under the dark water at any time. I started swimming back to shore as quick as I could, constantly imagining a hand reaching up from the depths to drag me down, never to be heard from. But that didn't happen. I made it to shore, relieved and surprised. Nothing had happened. I took a sigh of relief and triumphantly held Eileen's soaked wedding dress to my chest. That was when I noticed the front door. The front door of my house. The front door of my house that was now wide open. Fuck. Before I could even start my sprint there, I heard Alfie barking a storm. No, Alf. I dropped the dress and began to race to the door as quick as I could. I got there in seconds and came charging in through the front door, the corridor drenched in lock water from my unwelcome guest once again. I looked straight ahead, seeing the back door now open, the water trail on the floor heading that way too. I heard Alfie's bark coming from the backyard now. I tore through the open back door and looked out into the dark backyard. The dark backyard this all started. There he was, racing off into the woods, naked, and with Alfie under one of his arms. He dropped down from his sprint into a spring crawl, like a chimpanzee or something, before he vanished through the tree line, into the forest. This fucking animal, he'd taken Alf. He'd taken all I had left. I staggered back into the house and collapsed on the kitchen floor. Grief, shock, adrenaline, all of them were running through my body. That was when I noticed it. Across the kitchen wall, smeared in blood, Eileen. And next to it, just perched on one of the cabinets, sat an eyeball. What looked to be a human eyeball. I knew for a fact it wasn't Alf's, and I doubted it was anyone else's. Had this fucker really done that? Had he ripped out his own eyeball? I threw up. I don't know if it was the sight of that or the adrenaline dump or both, but it all just came out. So that leads me to tonight. I'm sat here, just finished my bottle of whiskey, and I'm feeling brave. I've got my axe right next to me and a torch for when it gets dark. I'm going to go into the woods tonight. I'm going to get Alfie back, and I'm going to kill this bastard once and for all. The sun sets at around 8 or 9 in Scotland now, so I'm gonna wait for that. Try and surprise him. I know these woods well from lumbering, so that won't be an issue. I'll update when I'm back. If I'm back, let yous all know how it goes. Wish me luck, God bless, and good night. Hiya guys, I've got another update. The last one was taken off of NOSLEEP, and I've been harassed by a mod on there to the point of 14-day ban, so I'll leave a wee link at the bottom of this to the past couple posts to get yous all caught up. So I finished writing update 2, picked up my axe and headed into the forest. I went out there with the intention of finishing this, of getting wee Alfie back. God knows what that man would be doing out there with him. Before it was deleted, I did manage to see a few of the comments, asking what I meant when I mentioned I'd had some trouble with the police in the past. Listen, I'd had some whiskeys. I mentioned some things that were on my mind, but I'm sure they're not relevant to what's going on now. Fuck it. I'll let you know the gist of it. Anyway, it was about 18 months ago, December of 2022. I was putting in serious hours working, 12, 13-hour days, 7 days a week. cutting, shaping, and transporting logs from the local forest into the surrounding towns and villages. My work is tough, and in the Scottish Highlands in winter the weather gets pretty atrocious. The winds easily hit 60, 70, or 80 miles per hour up the bends. Hills for the Americans again, which is where I'm based. There was this one day, Christmas Eve in fact, we were working up one of the bends, clearing it of any trees that posed a warning to the roads at the bottom of the bend if they were blown over by the wind. Eileen was annoyed I was working Christmas Eve. She grew up in an orphanage, so this time of year was hard for her, but money's money. We had this young lad working with us at the time, Alfie Simmons. He had only just turned 17, was just wanting to learn a trade and picked tree surgery. I wish he'd have picked plumbing, or carpentry, or fucking anything else. Anything other than what he did. Anyway, we were nearing the end of the shift. About 7 p.m. or so, we were talking about the plans for Christmas Day the next day. I remember it so vividly. We'd began to walk back to the car when a huge gust of wind hit us. Probably 120 to 140 miles per hour. We were all floored. I remember hugging a boulder next to me, praying I didn't get dragged down the rocky side of the bend. I closed my eyes and waited. After a few seconds, it died down enough that we could all stand up and look around. And I, Alfie, the young Simmons boy, well, he fell. I became more and more distant from Eileen after that. Then in January 2023, she vanished. She left a note saying I was getting too much to deal with and left while I was at work. We searched for her for weeks, never found her. Well, we found some of her, a hand and a leg, out in the forest. Police said that she'd probably wandered off into the woods in a manic state and died of natural causes, and then was scavenged by animals, so no body. Due to the closeness of all the community, and that I grew up with the police, they said they'd look the other way, and they investigate further, as if there would be anything else to find anyway. Cheeky bastards, so that's it. The last thing she ever got me was a new puppy. Yous can all see where his name comes from now. Now that's out the way, I'll tell yous about what I found last night. So I headed out, axe in one hand and torch in the other. I was traversing through the tall dark trees for only about 10 or 15 minutes or so, following this path that seems to have been made when I heard it. Alfie's wee bark. It was close, just through some more bramble bushes and fallen trees. I shined my light through a gap in the branches, and that's when I saw it. It was an old abandoned shed by the looks of it, maybe only the size of a living room. One of the walls had near enough entirely rotted away so I could see inside. There was rusty tools hung up, a stained mattress in the corner, and dead animal carcasses littering all of the floor. Most of them looked half-eaten. Another wee bark beside the shed. There he is. Bless his poor wee heart. He was chained up at the side of one of the walls, shivering. I ran over to Alfie and quickly started undoing the chains. He started wagging his tail as soon as he realized it was me. "It's okay, boy. Your dad's here." I freed him and was about to leave when I took another glance at the shed. That glance revealed something interesting. Some old photographs scattered on the floor by the mattress. I had to look. I had to see what this monster looked at for sentimental value, and when I saw what it was, I was floored. Eileen, I asked myself. It was her, unmistakably. Sure, she was younger, probably only 15 or 16, but it was her without a doubt. And there he was as well. I recognized his dark eyes and hair, his brown skin, his smile. But in this photograph, his smile wasn't crazed, it was normal. He was also way younger, and not disheveled of course, and was only about 11 or 12. They had their arms around each other and were hugging for the picture. I went to pick up a second photograph when I heard footsteps approaching the shed. Shite. I scooped Alf up under my arm and ran around the corner, hiding behind a tree. I watched the man approach the shed, crawling up on all fours. His scraggly beard was dripping with blood, and his mouth clutched what looked like a dead rat. Was he planning on eating that thing? Fuck, those animal carcasses were eaten by him. He suddenly noticed the empty chains on the ground and dropped the rat. He began screaming this horrific scream. I don't know if you have heard a fox cry, but it sounded like that. He looked around and saw me, and I saw him. I saw him and his missing eye. Jesus. He had gouged his own eye out and left it for me. He let out another blood-curdling scream and began to bolt towards me. I turned on a dime and raced back the way I came, Alfie under my arm, the man on my heels. I burst back through the tree line into my backyard and tore up the back steps and through the back door of my house. I finally turned and looked. There he was, stood just on the tree line, perfectly still, mouth dripping with rat blood, eye socket dripping with his own. He stared, I stared. This lasted about a minute. Then he turned and walked back into the woods. I put Alfie down and hugged him, crying. Eileen knew this man. What the fuck? What did he want? And, oh my god, I have to do something. That's me signing off for tonight. I'll update when I can, if I can. As soon as I'd finished writing the last update, something clicked in my head. Fuck. I raced upstairs and pulled an old shoebox out from beneath the bed. It was Eileen's stuff from her childhood. I'd put off going through it and clearing it out until now, but I knew I had to in order for this to make sense. In there, I found stacks of papers. They were diary entries from Eileen. Fuck, I'd never seen these before. I sat with the wee man and began reading through. Instead of summarizing, I think it's best if I just write what she wrote word for word. The 26th of November 2022, Derek's working an awful lot these past few months. He seems to have no time for me, and when he does, he's usually moody or angry. I don't know how I could ever tell him about Ravi. Derek grew up in such a small village, everyone knowing everyone, so he's so close-minded. I don't know how he would react to Ravi. The past few months his psychoses have got worse. He has this new habit too. He's began to scratch at his eyeball. I think when he's stressed. I'm just glad I could build him that wee shed in the forest to keep an eye on him. I just know he'd be in prison or dead if he was out in the real world. We really do need better mental health resources in this country. But what can I do? We grew up in the orphanage together. He's the closest thing I've ever had to a brother. He has his flaws, but he's my family. But Derek would never understand that. He'd see his brown skin and mental issues and see nothing else. Nothing but a freak. I'll keep bringing Ravi food and old photos of us to keep him going, and some comics if he gets bored. I really hope he's okay. The 26th of December 2022. Well, Christmas was shite. I don't blame Derek after what happened to that young Alfie Simmons boy, but he really didn't need to drink that much. He got blackout and started screaming at me. We're so isolated out here by the loch in the forest. Sometimes I worry about what he could do. No, that's ridiculous. I think I'll get him a wee puppy. He needs a pal, border terrier or something. I'm not sure. He still doesn't know about Ravi. I don't know if he ever will, to be honest. The 3rd of January 2023. I'm getting seriously scared now. Derek won't put the bottle down. I got him that new dog. He's called him Alfie, which is cute, but he still finds his way of taking his anger out on me. I want to leave, to run away, before I get hurt, but I can't leave Ravi on his own in the forest. I'm not sure. I'll think of something, but I can't run. I just hope he changes. That was the last entry in the diary, before she went missing. Fuck it, why lie now, before she died? Before I, Derek McRae, killed my wife Eileen Donaldson. I just couldn't put up with the arguments, the screaming. When I had a drink, I became a different person. A monster even more than that one that was scratching at my door. Ravi, Eileen's brother. One night it got out of hand. I'd finished a whole bottle of whiskey. She smashed an old photograph of mine in anger, crying, and I just had enough. I picked up my axe and just swung. I'm not going to go into details of the rest. I'm sure you can picture the horrific scene. The blood. I rode out to the middle of the loch and tied bricks to her body before I dropped it and watched her sink to the bottom of the loch. Watched my Eileen sink into the dark abyss so gracelessly. I guess he was watching too, Ravi, watching from the tree line. He knew the whole time, probably why he put her dress in the loch. He was trying to give it to her. Poor fucker is clear that crazy. He didn't know what to do though, until that night. That night a few months ago, when he came to my back door. It doesn't matter either way. After I lied to the police, had the murder covered up and hid the body, I put it to the complete back of my mind. I almost forgot I did it. I dissociated myself from that whole situation. But after reading those diary entries, fuck, what the fuck have I done? I'm going to turn myself in. I decided that as soon as I started reading the diary entries. But I owed you all an explanation first, so this is that explanation. I'm so sorry to you all. I'm sorry, Eileen. I should have been a better man. I'm going to go to the police now. I'm going to tell them everything. I'll bring the diary entries just after I finish this bottle. Wait, I can hear it again. Alfie is sat next to me, but I hear it. The scratching at my back door. I think I'm going to go out and see him to let him do what fuck. I heard a window smash. He's in the house. I need to finish this now. God bless and good night. Thank you everyone, and Eileen, I suppose I'll see you soon.